Hello, this is Xavier Cortada, and welcome to another session of the Miami Corona Project's Conversations. Today, I'm honored to have Xavier Suarez, District 7 Commissioner for Miami-Dade County. He represents numerous municipalities, including the city of Miami, the village of Key Biscayne, the city of Coral Gables, the city of South Miami, the village of Pinecrest, and of course, other areas of unincorporated Miami-Dade County. Suarez was first elected mayor of the city of Miami in 1985, and then re-elected in 1987 and in 1989. During his tenure, he worked diligently towards the construction of affordable housing, prioritized community neighborhood improvements, and received national praise for his effective handling of civil disturbances. Since 1993, Suarez has focused on practicing law and writing 6 books. A Unified Theory of God, Mind, and Matter, the first, was published in 2005 by Author House. Commissioner Suarez attended Villanova University on a presidential scholarship where he earned a bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, in mechanical engineering in 1971. In 1975, he received joint degrees, a Juris Doctor, and a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Law School and the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He published a law review article on congressional immunities and performed a consulting study for the U.S. EPA on the issue of performance standards for new sources of pollution. Commissioner Suarez was born on May 21st, 1949 in Las Villas, Cuba. He has lived in Miami since 1975, married to Rita Suarez, and is father of 4 children, Francis Xavier, Olga Marie, Ana Teresita, and Carolina. Mayor Suarez, it is my honor to have you here at the Miami Corona Projects. And I really do appreciate on a time like this, Commissioner, for being here. I first remember meeting you a very long time ago when you were doing some pro bono legal work for my family, my mom and my dad, back in 1976. And I remember meeting you. I was an altar boy then at Jesuit Catholic Church in 1976, and you gave me a book, a little book, 20,000 Leagues Over the Sea. I was just so honored to have met you way back then and to
Jules Verne.
Yeah. It's been an age. It's been an age.
And your mom is Rosario, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Still hanging in there at St. Dominic's or no?
No, she moved to St. Anne's. She's in a nursing home. And as you know, we're about to talk about COVID-19 and the coronavirus. And we got a deep scare there because that was one of the nursing homes that had a couple of cases. But fortunately, we're good. Like the facility has been tested. There have been no cases. She's really under the great care of Catholic Charities there, and she's doing really well. She fell and broke a hip, so she had to move to that nursing home. So thanks for asking. I actually spoke to her on FaceTime this morning, and I told her I'd be meeting you, and she wanted to say hi to you and to your son, Francis, who used to visit her at St. Dominic's. So hi from mom to both of you.
Francis is in a hot place, but in the matter of coronavirus, when you allow me to get into that, I will be making mention of what his role has been and the way he's handled it.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, in this conversation, the Miami Corona Project, it's a conversation between, so the community can, have a free-flowing conversation with their civic leaders, and obviously, your son, Miami's mayor, I think Miami's first Miami-born mayor, Francis, did test positive for the virus. And I was just wondering how this pandemic, clearly at home, your son, has affected you and has affected your family.
Before that, and perhaps more important for the collectivity of Miami, he took it upon himself to make a decision that I thought was a tough one at a time that it was much criticized, including by the other mayor that we have to deal with in the county, Mayor Jimenez, which was to prohibit or cancel 2 events that were coming up in early March. I think his order canceling Ultra with about 150,000 people expected from 105 different countries. Sometimes an event that can spread a virus is more important for the number of countries participating than the number of people. But and then Calle Ocho subsequently with 250,000 people, also I'm guessing from 100 different countries. So that decision was a tough one. I think it was the first decision by any major city mayor in the country to cancel events that were absolutely crucial to our economy. There's no other city except maybe what you might call Las Vegas. I'm not a fan of gambling or Las Vegas, but that relies as much on tourism and the leisure industry and restaurants as Miami. You know, even though Miami has a lot of other things going for it, and then on top of that, the cruise port. So the coronavirus, I've written a lot about this, and I'll make that available to your followers. But among the things that I've written is that the industry, that when we started shutting down industry, and rightly so, industries, and rightly so, but the one most affected is also the one where people get paid the least. It's the leisure industry. They have the least benefits, almost no job security, and a lot of times no health care insurance, no sick days or anything else. So they're hanging by a thread as it is, and boom, that's the one that for valid reasons had to be closed down very, very quickly and decisively, to the point that hotel occupancy went down to about 10%. You know, only folks that are in necessary, and by the way, some of them healthcare workers, some hotels and some of our principal owners of large rental buildings, specifically the Miltons, made available, in one case, 300 apartments for healthcare workers so they wouldn't have to go home and then contaminate the family. So we did a lot of right things in Miami. No one allowed in the senior centers once we realized how grave this thing was and how much it could spread in a congested area. And by the way, another thing that people don't notice, you know, it's a COVID-19 is not like a COVID-19 or a COVID-19, you know, like the famous poem. Depending on the viral dose that you have and on the immunity of the person and the age of the person that you might transmit it to, it becomes deadly. Or actually, as in Francis's case, he may have gotten it from a Brazilian dignitary that was in town or diplomat. It almost didn't affect him at all, but right away he went public. He did daily, whatever you call it, podcast, whatever the term is. Now we all do it. I guess this is kind of like that.
Yeah.
And
he self-quarantined. I remember seeing those posts on Facebook, or you would drive by. But yeah, no, your son provided extraordinary leadership at a time when the whole nation was waking up to what was happening. I remember all of those. I saw him on national news talking about it. So yeah, I do know the leadership that he brought.
I tend to be a little bit of the opposite of a germaphobe. You know, I tend to be a little bit reckless. You probably remember some of the things I've done over the years. I still pick up the trash when I run, by the way. And I know they tell me, not likely to get COVID-19, but likely to get some more stuff, or just as bad.
By the way, have you seen more gloves and masks around in your because I do it. I've seen those too. It's just people are scared. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I see a glove or a mask, I take another piece of foil of some sort and I pick it up with that. But you know, those decisions were very well made. Subsequently, you know, as to senior centers, as to providing masks, we did not do a good job of our first, not the first responders, the classic ones, but let's say the bus drivers. One day I showed up at the county and I found out that same day that I was going to look at the buses as they arrived, because the TWU union had complained that they weren't clean, that there wasn't enough social distancing, and I wanted to see it for myself. I took pictures.
I was horrified by that picture. I saw it on Facebook. Horrified by it.
And that same day, I had the head of the union, Jeff Mitchell, with me, who's also the head of the AFL-CIO, so he's a pretty important labor leader. And he said, by the way, we're expecting 500 protective masks to be delivered tomorrow, but we're really short. So I started asking the bus drivers that day, and 3 out of 4 told me that they had gotten their own masks. And I said, oh no, this can't happen. And by pure coincidence, that exact same day, I'd gone by my office and there was a box, enormous box with 1,000 of them. So 500 went straight to Jeff Mitchell. He took them with him that day and it worked out. But it's not the way things are supposed to be. We forgot the people that are on the front lines who happen not to be healthcare workers, who happen not to be police, not to be fire, But in this case, people who have to clean the buses, people who have to provide security on the trains, very low paid private companies, and our own bus drivers. It was just ridiculous. So I raised a little bit of, you know what, and ultimately things got resolved.
So I think that was an example of one particular sector, people in the county bus drivers. You know, you've been a leader of this community for a very long time. I mean, I remember going in marches with you on 12th Avenue when I was a kid. So you know Miami really well. You were
and you have increasingly become more and more like looking like Burt Reynolds, I want to tell you. Maybe it's the slightly receding hairline or the thick eyebrows.
Well, I was going for Brad Pitt, but I'll take Burt Reynolds. Thank you.
I think Burt Reynolds doesn't have a lot of money, by the way.
But look, you've provided incredible, courageous leadership. As you remember, you appointed me as chair of the city's youth task force, and we focus with gangs with Mickey Minogue and those folks after the disturbances. Remember those days back in the early 90s when I was in law school? So you know the city, you know every corner of it. During our civil disturbances, you displayed tremendous amount of courage and leadership in trying to address that issue and bring some humanity to chaos. Right now, I believe that our county, our state, our country is suffering an intersection of different emotions, some of which are exacerbated by the current conditions of this pandemic. And I just, for a second, want you I want to capture your voice at this moment in time as someone who deeply understands this community to explain what Miami is feeling right now, and not just obviously the residents of your district, but county-wide. You know, those individuals who can't go to Instacart, those individuals who must take public transportation, those individuals who cannot stop working because their families depend on them. You know them well. You've served this community for years, and if you could just, as a thinker and as a leader, just tell us how has this pandemic impacted us here in Miami-Dade County today?
Are we back on the George Floyd demonstrations and coronavirus, or the combination of the two, or more on the latter?
I think it's how they all come together, because what I've noticed is, what we all know is that, I think I sent you an email as I was talking to you, maybe I texted you, telling you about how seeing the way that this Miami mayor handled the disturbances reminded me of a younger Xavier Suarez, the mayor's father, on how he also addressed that, and how in this Miami at this moment, at this time, there was a different response. We still have and also how depressed I was that we're still struggling and fighting the same underlying issues, the same ones that are again exposed and you started talking about this, exposed during this pandemic. So it's the poor, it's the marginalized, it's those who don't have access that fare worse. And just like the pandemic, if the poor person on that bus, that day worker, that person without benefits gets infected, clearly it's horrible for that person and their family, but for the broader community. And the same thing with systemic racism, the same thing with poverty, right? So they all intersect. We're all connected as a society.
And government officials who, are hard-headed on some of these issues, I hate to be critical, but one of my colleagues who is running for mayor also, as I am, pushed hard to provide benefits to employees who have been laid off at the airport. Now, let me explain the relevancy and the importance of this. We have about 3,000 county employees that work for us at the airport. None of those were laid off, okay? None of those were furloughed. None of them lost any benefits. If anything, they got to stay at home and get a little fatter maybe. And those that maybe needed to do like you and I, run around and maybe get a little bit of a suntan in some cases. But some of us were born with a pretty good suntan, so that's okay. So, but 30,000 folks work for companies that serve the airport, okay? And some of my colleagues don't seem to understand that when, let's say, Commissioner Daniela Levine Cava suggest, and of course with my support and most of those that are on the commission that I think along the way that you think and I think progressively, and try to help folks that are in a lesser condition. I always say that a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. And I found out that we always quoted Hubert Humphrey on that. I found out that Gandhi said something very much along the same lines. So maybe it goes back before Hubert. But, in that situation, some of them argued, believe it or not, that we can't extend benefit, we can't force people who deal with us to pay more or to give more benefits to their employees when they're laid off, at least give them healthcare, insurance. Just carry them over for those 30 or 60 days while they apply for payroll protection or the other benefits the county's extending to them. And I said, do you guys realize that when you have a monopoly like an airport, we can not only can we say to these folks, you either pay this or you will no longer be our concessionaire. We'll give it to someone else who's willing to pay this, and it doesn't create any problem in the marketplace. There's no lack of competition. It's a minimal increase maybe in what they have to charge to wrap your bag or to provide handicap wheelchairs or whatever they do, but it's minimal. And by the way, I said one day, one of my commissioners almost fell off the dais. We can also do reverse privatization, and they went like, oh my God, what has he said? And I said, well, what that means is a lot of those services that Ulan and some of these other companies provide, we can provide with our employees. And so then we contract with ourselves, not only for the main contract with American Airlines, but also for the people who bring food to American Airlines, or the people who bring wheelchairs or wrap the bags or whatever. And they made it sound like that was something, that would come out of, I don't know. I don't want to say the book that I'm thinking about because somebody's liable to quote me in this campaign. So that's the kind of leadership we need. We also need a little bit of cooperation from the media. I had some conversations this week with the publisher of the Herald about a headline that implied that Latinos were not participating in the protest. And then another article, it was accepted with a certain amount of goodwill by a reporter that covers this, by Doug Hanks, who kept saying that 4 Black commissioners want to have a CIP, but the mayor vetoed it. Well, the mayor vetoed it and we could not get a supermajority, but there was 8 of us supporting it, okay? It was 4 Black commissioners and 4 non-Black commissioners, and so the media playing over and over and over again, a man putting a knee to another human being who is asking to breathe, who is dying, and constantly doing it over and over again, or a protester who gets out of hand and yells an obscenity at the police officer or whatever. Sometimes the media has to be a little bit cooperative. I rely on these matters a lot on Dr. Marvin Dunn, and Marvin wrote a beautiful letter to the editor. I don't know if you saw it yesterday. I hope your listeners and your followers can see it. I've just submitted one to the Herald myself at the request of the publisher. Hopefully they'll publish it. And the anguish that we feel is on all sides. It's not an ethnic thing, but there are some ideological differences. There are some people who are a little bit stricter on law and order. And one of them today wrote me, how important it was for him that we repaint the statue of Christopher Columbus. Well, that's not my highest priority at this particular point. But it is for him, and so to react and say that person is insensitive because he wants to repaint the statue of Christopher Columbus, or that person is an extremist because he doesn't think Christopher Columbus was the greatest thing on two wheels. So we have to try to avoid the ideological differences that add to the racial differences. And another anecdote on that issue. One of my big supporters in my life and in my campaign and doing good things in the community is a general contractor named Leighton Brown. We were talking the other day about how Blacks and and Hispanics are participating or not participating, and whites and Caucasians and whatever the terms are. And he said, you know, I'm not just black, I'm also Hispanic because I'm married to a Hispanic. So, you know, he was trying to say my culture, and I think in Miami, we're all a little bit Hispanic, we're all a little bit Caribbean or a lot Caribbean, you know, we're all a little bit Asian, we're all a little bit African American, and we all probably now have a fair amount of blood from any of those parts of the world. So, you know, the more we look at things in terms of, you know, what Dr. King said, you know, the content of the character, the better we're going to get along. And occasionally we're going to have disagreements. Some people don't think that we should ever let someone in a demonstration take to the streets, and that we should stop that immediately and arrest everybody. Well, the mayor of Miami, again, my son the other day, said there's a delicate balance. There's a delicate balance between having to use police force to restrain people that are basically peaceful and that are basically yelling out slogans that they have an enormous right to yell, and by the way, with which many of us agree, but and of course not going up on I-95. I mean, you have cars here going 60 miles an hour. Somebody's going to get hurt. So, you know, it is a delicate balance. A good politician has to do what I tried to do in 1989. And by the way, you haven't noticed me getting too involved, but I'm behind the scenes. Francis knows if he needs me, I'm 5 minutes away. Once or twice, I have gone to the command center, okay? Because I want to see for myself how things are being handled. But I don't want to get in his way either. You know, he's a pretty capable guy. He's closer to you in age than to me, maybe. But
no, I think I'm closer to your side. I remember visiting you when I was a law student and he was a child at your house. So yeah, no, I'm closer to you. But thank you for making me think I'm youthful.
And he's 42. So
yeah, no, I'm up in age. I'm 55. I think. But hey, look,
okay,
I
so
know
you're
that
closer to him. You're closer to him.
Oh, well, then you're the youthful looking one, sir. I have more canas than you do and less hair. But then again, you're that basketball player that used to play in Overtown. I remember that as well from the early days. But look, Commissioner, I definitely want to, because I know I have a clock that you need to be somewhere. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions.
I'm okay in time. The missus hasn't shown up for somewhere we're supposed to go, so we're okay.
You sure? Because I was told that 2:30 is.
Yes,
okay.
I'm okay.
Good. Okay, well, no, I mean, so I have a couple of questions to ask you. Let me ask you one more about the corona, and then I actually want to ask you some questions because aside from being our commissioner, you're aspiring to be our mayor. You're running for mayor of Dade County, and I want to ask a couple of questions about what your administration would do about this pandemic on day one of your administration. I also want to ask you to give a message of hope in this time when there's a lot of pain and suffering and uncertainty. The stock market, dropped by 7% yesterday. We don't know if jobs are going to come back. So I'm going to ask you just to reflect on those. But before I do, I just want to ask you the last question about this pandemic before focusing about you as a mayoral candidate, and that is, what lessons have we learned? What vulnerabilities have been exposed? How has this pandemic shown us how unprepared we were? What did we do wrong? How were we caught, basically in a situation, a predicament that we are in now? And what can we do better in the future? And I know this sort of dovetails as to what you would personally do, but let me just ask broadly, not as a candidate, just generally as a commissioner sitting here looking at this. Just assess where we are and what lessons can we learn from how like the beaches just opened 2 days ago. Like, where are we today? What's the impact of this pandemic? What have we learned? What good things, what bad things?
And on that theme of hope, my article to the Herald that I submitted, I'll send you a copy afterwards, ends with the famous line from Abraham Lincoln, that America is the world's last great hope. Miami, in many ways, within America, is also, a great hope.
Absolutely.
We have done a lot of things right since 1989, when we had the last, serious racial disturbances. We have done a lot of good things for Miami. Already has a citizens independent panel. It's been struggling with subpoena powers. You know the legal ramifications of that quite well.
Yeah, Miami, I was in the nominating committee of the first CIP. I remember that way back when, yeah.
This week, I spoke to Joe Sirota because he was chairman of the county's fairly ineffective one, and now we're getting ready to do something serious. Technology is also a help. You know, people say, you know, all these bad things that happen when folks, you know, put negative stuff on in their blogs. Yeah, but there's a lot of positive too that happens. We're able to talk today without any one of us that might contaminate another if they have immune issues or if they have respiratory issues or diabetes or heart condition. We're able to monitor what is happening electronically. The mayor of the county did one good thing after a little while when he was not getting answers from the private hospitals as to how many people were in there with coronavirus and how many were in ICU and how many had passed away, et cetera, et cetera. He signed an order saying every day you have to give us your data. Don't give us the names of the people. There's a law that we all know is HIPAA, but even HIPAA, the government can go beyond HIPAA and get information, specific information as to the age of the patient, et cetera. So we have better data. I post every day the latest data. We have had an upsurge, for example, in number of cases confirmed, but be aware of this. When you see that, you know, 1,100, 1,200 last week in the state of Florida, that the percentage that are tested and that have the virus has actually dropped from around 10% at the beginning of those that have symptoms to about 5%. And keep in mind that the randomized testing in the county, I criticized a little bit of the methodology that the mayor used because he had his voice calling people. I said, that's going to have self-selection. If they like him, they're going to want to be tested. If they don't like him, they're going to hang up. You know? And so I don't know that the people who like him or don't like him are going to be more prone to get the coronavirus, younger or elder. But that one showed about 6% of the county with, you know, having had the virus, or because it's an antibody test. So we're never going to get much below that, and so, you know, people should be looking at the number of folks that are hospitalized, whether we have enough beds, if the thing has a recurrence, how many are dying, how many are, and if we have lack of ventilators or anything like that. God help us if we had had the problem of New York, you know, and also don't get too alarmed by models of people that want to be in the media. You know, I mean, the folks from University of Washington, I criticized them in an article in community newspapers, you know, saying that that Florida was going to need 60,000 beds, and Cuomo the other day was saying, God, they said we needed 120,000 beds, and Governor Newsom, they said we were going to need 160,000 beds, you know, and it's hysteria. One of the things we did when Francis got the coronavirus, they told us that we should get tested. You know, got a little criticism for you know, our favorite newspaper, okay, the only English daily that we have. But actually, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's contact tracing. So 40 some of us got tested that were relatives or friends or associates or colleagues on the commission. And you know how many tested positive? 0. So there was something about transmissibility there that we should have learned. So we have computers, we have data, we have total right to know. Anyone that ever wants to know anything from me about what I'm doing, what I'm saying about the county that is not somehow protected by law, from the Sunshine Law, just put a little thing and say under Chapter 119 of the Florida statutes, this is a public records request. And if they don't answer you, you know, the next one I always used to do when I was not on the commission, I would CC the Economic Crimes Unit of the State Attorney's Office. And you cannot imagine how quickly they respond. That has penalties that include not only fines, but jail time if they don't respond. So government is much more transparent. Now, we've had some recent situations where certain things in the county, certain unsolicited bids going to certain companies, you know, from Malaysia or China or whatever, were not revealed after a trip by officials to China, and they erased their phone records. That's not good, okay? But and that kind of leads me a little bit to, but back to the economy. There are indications that we're going to do pretty well. Let me say this: the county budget has not suffered as much as you might think. no more than maybe 5%. Why? Well, we rely to a great extent on real estate taxes. And our tax roll figures came in June 1, 11 days ago, actually went up close to 5%. So 5%, yes. Now, because it's based on January. So we're going to take a little bit of a hit in one class of real property, office buildings. Office buildings, a lot of folks are going to, but that also gives us a lot of opportunities. I said the other day that we should not spend $160 million on signalization because 20% of the traffic probably will be reduced by people working out of their homes. And another 20%, and here's a little bit of a campaign pitch, by having free public transit. Okay, we've had that in the last few days, except when the mayor decided to cancel it altogether. That was not a good thing. But so, we should be able to provide the services and actually maybe increase some of them and make some of them cheaper. And hopefully eventually have free public transit. This was done in Kansas City by the newly elected mayor. By the way, he's an African-American man who used to be homeless, became a lawyer, became a judge, a law school professor, became mayor, and 3 months later, Quinton Lucas, boom. Okay, we need free public transit in Kansas City. That was a $9 million hit. Now for us, it's a little bit more than that. We're much bigger than the city of Kansas City. We've got almost 3 million people. But in our case, the revenues have gone down from 100 million that we get from the bus and metro fares to about 40 million. So, okay, once you're down to 40 million, anything less than 50 or 60 is 1% or less than 1% of our general operating budget. Let's go to free public transit, which helps a lot the same workers that have to get to work. They can't work like you and I are doing right now from our respective, I don't know if that's a home because it looks
That's
like
my home office because I'm at home. There's my home office and I am not leaving here for a while.
And I'm desperate to know what some of those books are so we can do a little exchange coming up, okay? I'm too cheap to buy books, so I try to get them from our public library. Nice. Or from friends.
I'm glad that we got to keep that public library alive. Absolutely. So look, the biggest order I think that the new mayor is going to have come November is how we move our economy, move our people through a pandemic that probably isn't going to be over. We're not going to have a vaccine. They're going to be the very vulnerable among us, and there's going to be a population that that needs to move, whether it's schools, universities, businesses, restaurants, cruise ships, the cultural community. What would a Mayor Suarez, Dade County Mayor Suarez administration do to tackle this pandemic moving forward?
I'll tell you how I would substitute expenditures that we have made with things that are really much more needed. I would never put 400 people in parks and in the beaches or someplace to force folks to stay apart. They do anyhow. Listen, and when you're outside, the chances of transmitting the coronavirus when you're outdoors in this weather that we have here and the humidity and the temperature are 1/20th, 5% of what they are in another circumstance. So we want to encourage people to be having 400 people when instead we could have had, let's say, 200 of those assigned to those parks. We have 270 parks. We don't have 270 park managers. We don't have hardly any coaches. If you want to learn to play tennis, even to swim, if you want to, because the lifeguards in the pools don't teach the kids how to swim. They just have to watch all of them. They even charge kids. You remember that swimming competition we had over there at Barrick Park? The kids were having to pay $1, and then there's a little girl there in Barrick saying, I can't come because my parents can't give me $1 every day. The resources have to be used better. I would have made available enormous amounts of protective equipment, enormous amounts of the sanitizer, and frankly, for some of our smaller shops, if we're going to require the temperature devices, there's a little device that is like this that they have at County Hall. It's like my laptop, and then from a distance measures, by infrared technology, your temperature. And it's a little bit expensive, a lot more expensive than the one you put right up to the person's head. And I had taken the specs from it and a picture of it and sent it to Mayor Francis, and said, maybe, you can alert your restaurateurs and your hotels. Expensive hotels, every single person that walks in should have their temperature checked. If you go to the county now, if you go to the city of Miami, if you go to public places, we can afford that stuff, okay? So if we have to help to equip schools with them, smaller shops, nonprofits, and maybe for some of the nonprofits and childcare centers to survive, we may have to help them a little bit with insurance. One of the things I want to do, and I've proposed, is that when we do affordable housing, we do public housing, but particularly affordable housing that's home-owned by the person, that the owner that lives there, is that we ought to try to eliminate all the cost of insurance. And the way you do that is you make the county self-insured up to the amount that typically is a deductible anyhow. Here in Brickell, we have paid millions and millions of dollars since 1992 to the insurance companies. But the deductibles have gone up because they're usually a percentage of value, 5%, whatever. So the value has gone up enormously. We never get anything, unless there's a catastrophic storm. And if it's a catastrophic storm, guess what? The insurance companies go bankrupt and we have to bail them out. So why don't we structure it so that catastrophic insurance is provided by the state, and the minimum amount of insurance, the deductible amount, the threshold amount is paid for by the county. When you get rid of that, you begin to make housing affordable. The other thing is we have 62% of the people in Dade County spend more than 50% of their disposable income on either housing or transportation. I've already talked about transportation. We have to extend the SMART plan to the 5 corridors, not give the money to Genting, not give the money to Brightline, for God's sake. I don't know why anybody would do that. And then housing, I want to spend as much as 1% of our budget to add to our affordable housing trust fund, of which we get about $50 million from the government. So we would double our effort in one fell swoop if we did that. And I've had support from some commissioners, including some that are running for mayor.
So last question, Tocayo. Look, there's some people that are feeling more confident things are going to be okay. There's others that are really worried, and there's heads of household that really are basically living off the the CARES Act
and the unemployment compensation.
Yeah, and that's going to end soon, and they don't necessarily have a job, and there's just a lot of people who at this moment are worried, and I'm just wondering, I think a mayor, an elected official, is more than a policymaker, and it's more than a politician. It's also someone to help heal, to help bring people together, to help console, and to give people hope. And if you could just end this conversation by, not talking to me, but talking to, Miami-Dade County as someone who aspires to lead them. Can you share something hopeful at this time of great chaos and crisis for them, based on your leadership, based on decades of understanding, leading this?
And besides being a unifying force and having us all get along as well as possible, and not be recriminating because somebody exaggerates one view or the other in a particular direction, people should know that government can help in many, many ways. And we have, for example, I wrote an article in Miami Today. I'm going to make that available to you also. We have right now available for capital formation, not only the money that we're going to lend to people individually in chunks of 25,000, which is 33 million of that, but we have roughly about $1 billion left of the Building Better Communities. We have the amazing transit-oriented development in my district. That's about $1 billion worth of development. We have the SMART plan. We're going to implement the SMART plan. As soon as I'm elected, hopefully, I will cancel any use of the half cent for operations and maintenance. Okay, that's 2% of the budget. So I already told you things that will lead up 3% of the budget. And there are many cuts that we can make that don't go to the average person like the 2 Xaviers that we have here, believe me, including 4,000 employees making over 100,000, $88 million worth of furniture, 7,000 automobiles, and 4,500 properties owned by the county that didn't exist 60-some years ago. So we will stimulate the economy by wise spending by providing services, by not imposing new fees. Increasing the garbage fee makes no sense whatsoever. Charging people to use highways that were built 30 years ago with tolls, or even worse, if you want to go faster, if you're richer, you can go faster. What is this? You know, and then the poor guy who's delivering the bricks, or the maid who's going to go to clean somewhere, or a guy's going to cook or wash at a hotel, you know, can only go slowly. And that's the one that has to get there. The rest of us can do a lot of work from our phones. So things are going to happen very nicely because Miami is also has become the most attractive city, both in terms of how we dealt with coronavirus and how we dealt so far with the protests and the reforms related to the death of George Floyd, that awful, despicable, as Francis called it the other day, act that was done, and the people standing around him. I wrote in my article that in Miami, if somebody's doing that to somebody else, the other people get involved. And you saw signs of that in that officer in Broward, who after the guy pushed the lady that was kneeling, she went after him. You know, do you see any other city where another police officer goes after a colleague like that? And how about the CVS guys that stood in front of the store and protected the store? How many cities?
That was such a beautiful. I was almost moved to tears to see those young protesters do that. It was.
And they were of all races. There was no, you know, single.
That was beautiful. They're on Biscayne Boulevard, absolutely.
And so
just to see that kind of leadership from our youth, understanding how passionate they were about an issue that's.
And they were taking a chance of their own safety. I know about that from 1989. I hadn't talked about it very much, but the other day, Channel 6 did a feature on it. And Tony Pifitone asked me a little bit, and I said more than I should have said about the risk that I underwent that day. But that's for me as a mayor or as a public official to do. The rest of you should be safe in your homes and in your businesses. And it's our job to show that Miami is going to come back, I think, very, very, very. By the way, if you haven't seen the data, everybody that's moving from New York is choosing Miami as their #1 place. So don't sell until you get the right price for your home, and try to, you know, move someplace where it's not as expensive. And we'll make sure that the free mass transit goes everywhere. So that won't be an issue. If you have to work downtown, we'll provide mass transit. It might take you a little longer than if we had a seamless system, but you use trolleys, you use a Metro Mover, which is free, and hopefully Metro Rail, Metro Bus will be free, and then neighborhood circulators, which is the final prong of the system.
Great. Well, it's been too long since we see each other. We follow each other and talk to each other and email each other all the time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being a thinker, a writer. You know, thank you for taking care of our community all these years. Thank you for being a commissioner. And I know the election is just around the corner. I know you're focused on that. And at the same time, you're focused on taking care of our county and your constituents. So thank you so much.
And thank you for all the same things on your side, always being there for the people that need a little bit of help from us.
Great. All right. Take care.